There was definitely some level of founder depression, grief, etc. that definitely kind of comes in and kicks in. I didn't realize that pattern till it was almost a year into it, and I realized what I was doing to myself and my body. And today the way I deal with it is actually by working out.
It's funny that one new activity can help you debunk a lot of your bad habits.
People around me, my wife particularly, has realized that, and she's like, okay, just go get your 30-minute run, come back home.
Do you think there's a big advantage what you've got because your partner is in fitness?
My sister is also into endurance. She does similar triathlon trainings and stuff like that. And so having that ecosystem where people understand it, 100% key to the success. We come from a family where everyone loves to play tennis. Growing up at the age of 6, 7, 8, 10, I used to go there almost every day, every weekend, and I used to play tennis with my dad. And that really brought in the love of sports for me.
The line between crossing that kida to the next level is also called junoon, right? I mean, data and metrics are super important, right? I mean, are you into wearable tracking? What kind of stuff do you track?
So my favorite digit is my Garmin watch. This is like a little computer on your hand. And like an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you can see all the data you want, but you're just going to shoot from the gut. Cycling is a very, very expensive sport. Every small thing that you need on a cycle costs a whole lot of money. So I'm actually trying to work with a lot of these cycling stores to, like you said, enable credit.
Do you think being vulnerable is a sign of progress?
100%. And if you had asked me this 5 years ago, I'd probably say no.
Hi, welcome to The Other Side. I'm your host, Dilip, an entrepreneur and an endurance athlete. In this podcast, we will explore the experiences of high-performing individuals while unpacking their mental and physical fitness routines that took them to where they are. Welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to talk to Gaurav Hinduja. Gaurav is the co-founder of Axio, one of India's leading consumer lending finance company. But in today's episode, we are not going to talk about startup or building a fintech company. We're going to talk how Gaurav, during his downtime as a startup entrepreneur, explored his pursuits in endurance sports, how he became a triathlete, and how staying healthy mentally and physically has anchored his professional and personal life. Let's get into the podcast. This episode is supported by Rainmatter Health. Rainmatter Health is an initiative to invest and support entrepreneurs and innovators who are building solutions to help Indians stay healthy. If you're a startup founder and has an interesting solution, reach out to Rainmatter and they will be happy to help. Before we get into the podcast, I have a request. It would mean a lot to me if you can subscribe to this channel in any of the platforms you watch or listen this content. It could be Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Let's get into the podcast now. Okay, Gaurav, thank you. Great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for doing this long endurance commute what you did.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
No, there's a lot to explore and unpack about you. I was told about you first by Nirupa, who was also the guest on the podcast. Yes. I know she's a long-time friend and a training partner. So probably a good place to start. How important do you think a training partner is for the endurance pursuits?
I think it's good to know and have people who are trying similar things, right? I think whether the person is training with you is not necessarily the most important thing, but have people who are going through the same journey. So we have a few friends who are going through the same journey. My wife was doing it a few months last year as well. So I think having a group of people who understand what the journey entails, how hard it is, the sacrifices, I think that's more critical than just having, someone to ride with or run with.
Yeah, right. I mean, so I do a sport where when I started, I of course had a lot of training partners, but because of the situation and the geography where I stay, I don't get a lot of training partners. But I often go back and try to connect the dots between the parallels, what you do on the other side, which is you are an entrepreneur. And often there is a topic around co-founders, right? So do you see there are parallels between this training partner and having a co-founder?
I would draw more parallels between my co-founder and the role that my spouse actually plays in my races, right? So my co-founder Shashank at work, I joke with him that he's my work wife, or I'm his work wife for that matter. And we actually balance each other out at work. When he's having high days, I'm having low days, or vice versa. When I'm having high days, he's having low days, right? I think it's a similar thing that I find for me in terms of how my spouse works with me, right? She's the one who many times when I'm having a bad day, training has not gone well, work is not going well, she's the one who kind of lifts me up. And hopefully, I think I do the same for her as well, right? So, and I think she's also very fit and she understands the entire concept of fitness and how these endurance events have played a very critical role in my life over the last 2 to 3 years. So, given that she gets that, I think that has become a bedrock for me in terms of how I manage my training over months and years.
Yeah, so so endurance as a phenomena has been not recent, but you've not been an endurance guy all your life. You were sporty.
Yeah.
You used to play a lot of sports. So we'll trail back on the childhood days. But before I get started, what was the workout in the morning today?
Oh, this morning was actually a 1.5 hour run for about almost 15 kilometers, followed by an hour of strength session.
Wow, crazy.
So I ran from home to Koramangala, where my actually gym is, and I work out with a person there, and so finished 1 hour of strength over there. So it was a good 2.5 hour workout this morning.
And all this is for a race what you're prepping for, right?
Yeah, this is for my first full Ironman, which is in Copenhagen on the 20th of August.
Amazing. So for the folks who don't have a context, a full Ironman would mean you start with 3.9 kilometers, 3.8 for swim,
yeah.
180 kilometers on the cycle, and 42.2, which is a full marathon.
Yes.
And you do all of that non-stop,
Yes.
right? When did this phenomena get onto you about endurance sports?
It was... I like you said, I've always been sporty as a kid, right? I used to play basketball for college, used to play tennis at a decent level at the state level about 25 years ago. But over the last 10 years, 15 years, as work, started to do well and work pressures, I completely forgot what sports and endurance was and what an important role it used to play in my life. But it was just around maybe 6 months or a year before COVID, when work started to get really bad. We were almost about to be acquired. The acquisition did not go through on the last day. And we literally went from, being one of the best fintech startups to, having the toughest days that we could actually have. That sent me into a bit of a tailspin. Work became worse as COVID kind of started to hit. And you get into this very negative zone, negative mindset. Getting to work on many days was very hard. And I just felt that I needed something to pull me out. And I saw the story you may have heard as a runner, the person of Bob Hoyt and his son. And this guy was pulling his son doing an Ironman, right? Whose son is probably 15, 20, 30 years old. He's swimming with a boat behind his shoulder. He's cycling with like a carriage behind his bike and then pushing a wheelchair. And I'm like, the mental strength that this individual must have is so inspiring. And this was right about the time when my two sons were born. And I'm like, if this guy can do it, like, he just has to, I should be able to take something from that. And I had a coach and a friend who was, also into doing Ironmans. And I just had a conversation with him. He said, why don't you just come for a ride with me? And yeah, that was about 2.5 years ago. One ride started the journey, and now training for my first full Ironman.
No, amazing. I mean, it's just amazing to see, and we were talking about this before we sat down for the podcast, that there are these parallels where, and that's what the intent for me is, to have these conversations where entrepreneurship itself is an endurance event. I mean,
Yes.
it's cliche, but it's been said enough now,
totally, yeah.
right? And but truly, someone who is actually doing that, building that, could really understand both the mental and the physical stress around that, right? And there's so much of parallel, because I've been an entrepreneur for a long time in my life. And then when I started doing endurance, largely focused on running, I could see a lot of parallels, right? Because at one point of time you are at high, and that high largely comes either you had a great run, or just because you got your commitment from an investor, or you got your big enterprise customer. But the very next day, you have absolutely a bad day because you found yourself into an injury, or perhaps you lost your most important employee, right? Yeah. So that endurance bit is fairly ingrained in entrepreneurs, right? But one thing which I've also seen in a lot of these conversations I've been having is that, and you might be exception, because it's not that everyone is very sporty right from childhood, right? There is a time in their life when they realize that, okay, yes, probably we have some sense of endurance, and let's try endurance sports as an activity. So in your case, you said because of the challenges what you were having, right? But are you also seeing those patterns that more and more entrepreneurs are taking into endurance activities, and their entrepreneurship experience is helping them do that?
Yeah, I'm starting to see that Actually, a lot, not just at entrepreneurs, even at senior folks within startups who've now been at startups for like the last 5 years, 10 years. As we see a new cycle of startups emerge over 10 years in India, you're starting to see that the lessons people have taken from their work is starting to play out in like sporting life, or vice versa, more importantly, right? And I think those parallels are actually in many ways very inspiring, right? So for me at work, I felt like a lack of competitiveness. I'm a very competitive person. If you ask my friends and family, they'll tell you I'm a very competitive person by nature. And when work was hard, those competitive juices started to kind of deplete to some extent. And I felt that I needed something, right? And so for me, getting my mojo back at work literally came from this journey. So as much as the entrepreneurship journey helped me get into Ironman, for me, it was almost the other way around. The Ironman journey helped me get back my mojo at work.
So you spoke about mojo, and I'm kind of realized that, and common thread is we do long runs. You do long rides. You also do long swim, right? And I can't imagine how much of mojo you would need to go back and do it. So I do probably 8 to 10 hours of training every week, and I could imagine for you it should be at least 15, 20 hours.
I'm not that much. I'm in the 13 to 15 hour range.
Right, but to get up and I'm doing only one sport, which is running. Yeah. You have to do running, you have to do cycling, you have to do swimming, then you have to do your strength, then you have to do your flexibility, then you have to do your rehab, and you have to keep doing it day in, day out, right? Now that you're taken up to the sport and you're fairly serious and you're spending that ton of time, right? It's not that you're living a privileged life where you're focusing only on your sporting pursuits, right? You have your primary passion, you being an entrepreneur, running a fairly growing startup right now. The days when things are just not going the way you want, but you come back and you see on your training diary you have a training block for the next morning, right? What makes you go back and do that?
It is actually that training block that gets me excited when I have a bad day. And that's how I've changed over the last 2-3 years. When I would have a bad day at the office or at home or whatever, I would typically resort to overeating. And the thing that would give me mental comfort or emotional comfort at that point was like a nice masala dosa or a biryani or something like that. But today, I get that, spirit when I say, okay, you know what, I've had a really bad day at the office. Tomorrow morning, instead of doing the 1 hour run, I'm going to do a 1 hour run and a 1 hour strength session. And I'm just going to kill it so that I can just get my endorphins back and I'm very active at work. So I actually use that as a mechanism to reverse the bad day that I've had, rather than letting the bad day at office kill the workout.
So what's typically, let's talk, what's typically your daily routine? Like,
I'm typically up by around 5:30 in the morning, do an hour and a half of workout typically on the weekdays. Weekends are typically longer workouts, 3 to 4 hours on the particular weekends, whether that's a Saturday or a Sunday. I drop my daughter and my boys to school. So that's around 8ish, right? And then I'm in the office by 9:30. Office till around 6:37. Back home, eat dinner. By 9 o'clock, try to make the kids sleep. And then by 10 o'clock, my wife and I are like just crash because it's been a long day by then, right? We have a good group of friends, a good social circle. So we tend to go out at least twice a week. On most days when I'm training over the last few months, I've stopped drinking. So my friends don't typically like that. But, it is a hectic life. We do travel a lot, especially on work. And so I think juggling these 3-4 balls together does become very, very difficult. So it is a tiring day at the end.
Yeah. So the chaos, and I know between amongst the amateur age group athletes who train for endurance, Fridays and Saturdays are the dreaded days when most of the world are looking forward and excited. Those are the days when these folks are getting to the bed early because they have an early morning training, right? So there is some form of chaos which this new introduction to your life is bringing to your overall sphere, right? How is it, and you said that the support group what you've got, right? So has it been after you got this that you've been able to balance this new approach, or were you fairly balanced in terms of...
No, the first year was actually very hard. I couldn't balance. I did a terrible job balancing it. I had typically withdrawn from a lot of work travel. It was lucky that it was just COVID, getting out of COVID at that point. So I didn't have much work travel. I wasn't doing much socializing the first year. But I think as time has gone on, I need to be fair to obviously, my wife, my kids, my friends, etc. So I think over the last few months, I've been able to strike a good balance. There are days where it doesn't work. We were out for a dinner last night and I had to get home at 10:30. So I'm like, I just skipped the last three courses of a good dinner, and I told my wife I'm going home. I'm just going to go and crash, right? And she's very supportive of it. But I try to maintain a good balance.
So let's trail back to the younger Gaurav. How was it growing up? What influences or what importance sports had as you grow?
Yeah.
Then you went to your graduation, and what impact that those early days did to you to who you are today?
Yeah, my earliest memories as a child and particularly into sports was my dad. We come from a family where everyone loves to play tennis. And so my dad has been going to Century Club where he's played tennis with a lot of his friends for almost now 4 decades. And so as I growing up at the age of 6, 7, 8, 10, right, I used to go there almost every day, every weekend, and I used to play tennis with my dad. And that really brought in the love of sports for me. Watching Wimbledon, watching French Open, 20, 25, 30 years ago with my dad, Boris Becker, Andre Agassi, watching those days, there was something just really good at that point about how you'd connect with your father, how you'd connect with sports. And that really sparked the plug. I think from there on, I really took a loving to basketball, thanks to the Bulls, thanks to Michael Jordan in the early 90s. And I was lucky enough to play basketball for my school as well as for my college. And that kept the sports spark alive. But then, like I said, once you hit the work world, everything just kind of went downhill from there till like 2.5 years ago when I was able to pick up the Ironman journey.
Yeah. Uh, what's your protocol around food? We just spoke about you had to skip the 3 course meal. Now there are two sides of it. One is that you have to eat to keep yourself nourished and get all the damage out from the system so that you're ready for the next day. Second is, which is a common phenomenon, stress eating, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially in a stressed environment, which is running a large company, these moments are coming your way almost every time, right? So, what's your relationship with food?
I have a very bad relationship with food, right? Like you said, I am a very big stress eater. And the days when I'm having a bad day, I can eat like 4 ice creams tubs in a sitting, right? The Haagen-Dazs cookies and cream, like I could finish half a tub of that in one sitting. So I have a very, very bad relationship with food. I've tried to get better at it, but when days are tough, stressful, like I said, I can end up eating. The good thing that I've been able to do over the last couple of years is I've been able to drop weight. So as work pressure was happening, I ended up putting on almost 20-25 kilos, where my peak weight was almost 95, 97 at that point.
Wow.
Over the last 2 years, because I needed to lose weight to train, right? I think my relationship with food has started to get better. I get a lot more controlled, and I know that, yes, I'd love to eat that biryani, love to eat the dosa, but that is going to cause me a world of pain in tomorrow morning's long run, right? You can literally feel that extra weight as you're trying to cross the 15th or 20th kilometer. And so the journey of the Ironman and journey of endurance has improved my relationship with food. And it's great that I've been able to lose weight over the last 2 years. But there are days where I just still capitulate and I will get back into my old habits. It used to be many, many days earlier. Now it's probably lesser number of days where I just go back to bad emotional eating habits.
Yeah, it's interesting you say. I mean, because it's funny that one new activity what gets introduced can help you debunk a lot of your bad habits, right? Yes. And I see a lot of people, most commonly trying to juggle with this issue of weight loss. We are not able to lose weight, and so on and so forth. And I've always felt that, look, movement can be the greatest anchor what you can bring to yourself, right? And not everyone has to do endurance per se, but any movement-based activity, especially if it can be a sports activity, because when you are into sports, you are also carrying yourself both mentally and physically, and that will give you a lot of internal signs and signals that something is wrong. Either it could be weight, or it's your digestion, it's your metabolism, which always goes back to what you ate, right? So that's a very good signal to give you that roadmap that you got to go back and fix what you're putting into your system, right? So no, that's interesting.
You have to have a goal for it. Like you said, losing weight for the sake of losing weight is not a good motivator, right? Yeah. I could never do it for 10 years. But when I said that I needed to finish the race in a particular time, all my coaches told me I need to drop 10 kgs. And that is the only reason why I was able to do it.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. So something what I have struggled a lot, and I see a lot of friends in my network, in the entrepreneur circle, also saying is mental health. Right, so there's one physical bit of it, and I say that out because in the world where we live today, the hustle and the grind culture is kind of celebrated or maybe over celebrated, right? I mean, you are a hero when you say that you've been grinding for so many years and you've been slogging for these many years, right? What's typically your toolkit around mental health? Because you've been on both the sides, in a point where perhaps not a good days where the trainings might not be going on, and of course the struggle, the hard days in building a company, right? So what's your toolkit?
Like I said, when we were going through a tough period at work, is when I think I felt my first dose of kind of a bad bout of mental health hit me, right? I think there was definitely some level of founder depression, grief, etc. that definitely kind of comes in and kicks in. Earlier, the way I would deal with that was just, I would, like I said, overeat. I would spend a lot of time on my sofa at home. I would miss work a few days and just binge watch TV, right? And it really wouldn't de-stress me, but it would get me to a point where I just literally fall asleep and then figure out, hopefully, the next day that I'll actually be better. I didn't realize that pattern till it was almost a year into it, and I realized what I was doing to myself and my body. And today, the way I deal with it is actually by working out. So I never get stressed or depressed or anxious when I have a bad workout. It never affects me, and maybe I'm a little lucky that way. But I use every workout to be able to deal with a bad day, a bad stressful day at work, when I'm depressed about work or whatever. I turn to endurance, I turn to an activity. And I really think, like you said, motion creates emotion. And that really helps me overcome something. So if I know it's going to be a hard day, I'm like, just do that extra push on your ride, do that extra push on your run. And that, the immense power it has on my mind has changed who I am. And I think, people around me, my wife particularly, has realized that. And she's like, okay, just go get your 30-minute run, come back home.
So we spoke about your wife a few times, Sheena, right? So, and I know offline we've exchanged note that she's into fitness big time, right? So amongst your peer, I don't know, maybe a few friends might not like you going to say what you want to say, but amongst your peers, when you say their partners who might not be into fitness, right? Do you think there's a big advantage what you've got because your partner is in fitness, or it doesn't matter that if you're self-motivated, it doesn't really matter what your partner is?
I disagree 100%. I think the role that your partner and friends and family play in this journey is 100% key to the success that you're going to have, right? Like you said, I've seen friends, relatives, etc., where the partner is not as supportive and they still achieve, and kudos to them. They achieve a lot, and that's just because they are mentally strong. But it makes the journey so much harder. And I am blessed and lucky that not just my wife, my kids, my parents, they don't like what I do when it comes to Ironman. They think I'm doing a lot of risky things by cycling on Bangalore roads, but they get it. And the good thing for me, my sister is also into endurance. She does similar triathlon trainings and stuff like that. And so having that ecosystem where people understand it. My wife, though not an endurance athlete, but she is totally into fitness. She runs a few fitness studios. So she gets the mental aspect and how it actually improves mental health, both for me, for her, and for everyone else. And I think without that support, I would not be able to do half of what I do.
Amazing.
And I'll extend that a little bit more to even, I would say, my co-founder. I think over the last 2-3 years, as I've developed this relationship with my Ironman journey, I think he has been extremely understanding of what it does to me. He is a great person when it comes to managing food and discipline about food. And I am great when I'm disciplined about workout. So we really feed off each other, so to speak. We do a lot of travel together. And he's always watching me how disciplined I am at food. And at my workouts. And I'm watching how disciplined he is about food. And we tend to kind of learn from each other a lot.
No, clearly, I think you're also blessed to have training partners both at work and otherwise. So that's a very lucky spot to be in.
Yes.
So, why is it always, and this is more, human behavioral, that we tend to pick up things when we are really going downward in that direction, and especially in health. And unlike a culture, it's not like, I'm not saying that everyone has to be doing a lot of sporty activities, but health, both mentally and physically, doesn't come out really on top of your pyramid as a priority as you're growing up, right? It usually comes when we have some lifestyle issue. The doctor says that, okay, now your BMI is off, now you want to start moving, and that's when we start picking. In your case, in my case, it's been all the same, that in our mid-30s we realize that, okay, shit is happening, so let's get our act straight. Why do you think that's the culture? I mean,
I think that's just Indian culture. I'm sorry to say this, but we've all grown up without realizing the importance of, it has always been the rat race, right? Go study, get first place, second place, get to the best college, get to the best grad school, either start your business or if you're getting a job, kind of rise the ranks, right? Sports, extracurricular activities have never played a critical role in most families. I won't generalize, but in most families in India, it hasn't played a critical role, right? Even for me, when I was growing up, I had the opportunity to go play sports professionally, but I was told no, because I had to study, I had to get the right marks, right? And so I think that's never taken priority in most Indian families. And I think that is very different from what happens in the West. Though I'm glad in the last few years it's really changed in India. I have some few friends now who, I know one of them whose kids is like 18-year-old and is now going for actually professional triathlon training. It's amazing to see the change that's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's just about upbringing and culture. And as kind of India grows, also people will realize that there is stuff outside work.
So at home, the three kids, when they see their dad doing early mornings, going for the rides and run, mom is doing her fitness, do you see that fabric in them right now? Is that of any upside?
No, one of the reasons, I have a reason why I do every race, or at least why I'm on this journey. And so for me, doing this Ironman is basically about two things, right? One is, how do I, really create and make Axio, which is my company, into a world-class company. So I always relate work to the race. And the second is my kids. I fundamentally believe that kids are a product of the environment. And so it is amazing to see how the kids actually react to my race, right? They know I'm going for my race. They watch videos with me. They know exactly how the Copenhagen race kind of looks like, what the route looks like. When I do indoor bike rides, I have both my sons standing there and just cheering for me. My daughter has actually designed a logo for my tri-suit, which is the initials of my wife and the three kids. It's MSSK. And so it's amazing to have them into it. And I would love for them to kind of come to the race. This is a hard one to take them to, but in the future, we are definitely going to kind of take them to, because I want them to see their parents kind of take on hard things and complete the things that they're going to say they take on, right? So there is a commitment that I'm making to them, that I'm going to do this difficult thing and I'm going to live up to that commitment. I'm not going to shy away. And that ability is what I'd like to see in them.
Now, that's an amazing thought process. I mean, and I can second to that. I mean, I have a 2-year-old and he knows his dad's a runner. He knows his mom is very serious about her workouts. And he knows it already by 2-year-old. So if someone comes at home, he calls them out and says, that's the medal. Because I have in the corner I put all my medals, right? So he would, I don't know if he's proud now because he's just 2-year-old, but he's actually pointing out saying that's his medals, right? And you say that, and he's pointing it to the wall to say that's the Boston Marathon poster, right? So and it's just a great thing because we've been an 80s kid, and like you said in the beginning, sport or staying healthy and fitness was not really a fabric at home. I mean, the very few people who had, they were blessed, but largely it was all academics, right? So sports was an extracurricular activity. So it's something what you do extra, not as a primary thing, right? So it was an extra activity all the time what you have to do.
The word itself is a bit misleading.
It is, right? So when you, you would, and every time you're called out to say that, look, you have to cut down on that because your studies are calling you out, right? And you will not get good marks and this would not lead you anything. And now when my dad is in front of his television and he's cheering for cricket or tennis, I would say, look, this is such a hypocrisy, because if you had made me do that, I probably would have been there doing it. But I think that's how the Indian culture is, right? I mean, you can celebrate others' misery and success, but you're not there to kind of cheer you up. No. So that moment when you said, when the downtime in the company, and then the both mental struggle what you had. Now when you are mentally and physically in a much better shape than what you were earlier. Any anecdotes, any situations where again you had to see those experiences, you have to cross paths with this experiences, but because of the current mental state what you've got, you could really swim through that?
Yeah, the tool set that I've developed over the last 2-3 years has helped me manage a lot of the stress that happens at work. Work is definitely much better than it ever was, but as an entrepreneur, like, work is never that good. There's always ups and there are always downs, right? And so every time there's like a bad situation, I kind of dig deep and I create a milestone for myself, right? So over the last year and a half, right, as the funding environment has changed, it became imperative for us and for almost every company to have a path to profitability and get profitable very quickly, right? As we saw a lot of our competitors almost kind of vanishing. And so for us, I had set a deadline that I am going to time my next race when the company is going to become profitable. And lucky for me that it's actually happening in the same month now. So next month when I go, we most likely will be profitable as a company. And so I create these milestones in my head. And this is what keeps me going, right? So it's near-term milestone, which is get profitability, do the big full Ironman race. 3-year out milestone is figure out a public listing, look at the world championships, or like swim the English Channel, right? Bigger the milestone at work, bigger the milestone in my endurance journey as well, right? So I ensure that I keep linking both of them all the time.
So very interesting, right? I mean, one thing which I have observed on myself also is that as you are aging as an age group athlete and you're evolving as a person, your superpower is to set reasonable goals, right? You suddenly would not want to stand up and say, I want to be a billionaire, right? You suddenly would not say that I want a 50x growth. And the same would go in your endurance pursuits. You would suddenly not want to say that you want to do a sub 7 hours in your triathlon or maybe do a sub 3 hours in a marathon, right? You know the situation, you know your environment, and you kind of set those goals accordingly. Like you said, you told yourself maybe in 3 years or 2 years you want to qualify for a championship, right? The Kona one, right? And that come, and I'm sure you know by now that requires so much more than what it is right now on your plate, right? Both time, your training, and a lot of other aspects, right? That, do you think, is a superpower for you right now?
Rather than, I would say the superpower is not so much in setting, smaller, more reasonable goals. For me I think it is setting the big goal, but giving yourself enough time and making sure the small goals happen so you reach that. So you set the big goal, keep it in a parking lot.
Set the micro goals.
Right? And then figure out what the game plan is to get there. So for me, the big goal of the next 2-3 years is the world championship or to like swim the English Channel. I am nowhere close to that right now. But I know that, okay, the first milestone is do the full Ironman this year. Do another full Ironman next year, but do it faster. The third year, hopefully do 2 Ironmans in 1 year and do them faster. So I've got like this ladder of goals that can hopefully get me there. Will I ever get there? I don't know. And I think the superpower is, it's okay if I don't get there. I'm at least trying, right? Maybe 20 years ago, if I didn't get there, I'd be really disappointed. But now I know that journey and that goal is actually helping me with something else. It helps me manage my mental state. It helps me manage stuff at work. So if that goal doesn't happen, I'd be disappointed, but it's not the end of the world.
So the goals are up on the wall.
It's up in my mind.
So when you set these goals, right? And what's your execution process like? I mean, who all do you typically involve? And I'm talking in particular because I know at work you would be talking to your investors, to your co-founders, to your management team. When you're setting up your endurance pursuits, what's your team structure like? I mean, how do you go about in saying that this is the race I want to do, this is the time I want to finish, and this is how I'm going to structure my training?
So, the longer term goals is just honestly within me. I don't discuss this with anybody because it's so hard to do. I don't want to, put it out there in the world. Let's see if it ever happens. But the near-term goals, I discuss with about 3 or 4 people, right? So one is I have a triathlon coach who's also a good friend, right? I discuss them. He gives me all my workouts, etc. So we discuss what strategy is for the race. I have a strength coach who I'm very lucky to kind of be able to work with. And he's like, okay, this is what we need to think through. This is the amount of time I need to spend on strength how many months I need to spend on stead to be able to get to that goal. There is obviously my wife. And fourth is just a good group of friends, honestly, who are training buddies and training partners who, we really bounce off each other and really absorb each other's energy. And we do it in such a way that many of them register for the same race or a similar race around the similar city around the same time. And so it becomes a nice kind of group activity and a holiday that we follow up with afterwards. So I think there are this group of about 4 or 5 people that are my core team, so to speak, when it comes to discussing and planning how and what I want to do.
So once you zero down on a race, talk to me about how do you go about and putting your training together, because we know there are 3 activities. So there's a 10 to 12 hours a week, hours of training which is getting packed in a week. How do you go about in structuring these bits?
Yeah, so a lot of the structure is given to me by my coach. I don't question it, honestly. I just blindly follow it. But it typically works out in such a way that you end up doing about 2 swims a week. So about 1 to 1.5 hours of swimming a week. You end up with about 5 to 6 hours of cycling a week, because you need to get used to sitting on the saddle for a good 6 hours. You're running for about 3.5 hours a week. And I try to do 2 strength sessions for about 2 hours a week. So that really brings it up to about 10 to 12 hours a week.
Any recent injuries which kind of give you any scar?
Touch wood, nothing so far. I've been lucky that way.
So that means the strength is really working
coach,
for you.
There is my coach Soumya, who runs stairs. Like, he is a godsend. And this is where my team comes in handy, right? Because the minute I told my wife I wanted to do a full Ironman, right? I had done 2 halves. The minute I said I want to do a full, she's like, the only way I will let you do a full is if you go and sign up with Soumya, right? And I was never training with him a 1.5 years ago. I started training with him maybe 6 to 8 months ago. And I think he's the reason I've not had any kind of injuries, as my training volume has significantly gone up.
Amazing. You were saying there's a meticulous approach in putting together these races, right? So what's really on top of your mind when you're going to choose one race?
First, it has to be in a city that I would love to visit. So we typically try to plan this in cities where my wife and I have never been. So it becomes a nice kind of holiday for us as well, a good way to experience and see a new city. Second, it should be a relatively popular race, because you want a lot of people there. The crowd support, the energy that the crowd brings is a big factor, especially when your legs are tired and your mind is ready to give up, right? That's the second. Third is the weather, right? I would not want to do it. I've done one race in the Middle East, and I will never do it in the Middle East in March again. And fourth is just the terrain of the course, right? So is it going to be a very hilly course? Is the ocean going to be really kind of rough during the month where the race is? These are the 4 or 5 factors that I typically look at.
So when you're looking in these aspects, triathlon, as most people might not know, it's a very tactical race, because you have to handle 3 different activities, plus there's a lot of ancillary aspects, which is your nutrition, which is your hydration, the weather, and therefore data and metrics are super important, right? Yeah. So what's your toolkit around your data variable stack? I mean, are you into variable tracking? What kind of stuff do you track?
So my favorite digit is my Garmin watch. I just love the level. This is like a little computer on your hands, right? It tracks from heart rate to oxygen levels to speed on the workouts, whether that's running, swimming, cycling, whatever it is, right? I spend a lot of time on the Garmin app and the Training Peaks app that my coach actually uses for me. And so I sometimes get too obsessed with metrics. And so I'm actually, at work also I get obsessed with the data.
That's the entrepreneur.
Maybe that's the entrepreneur. So I try to pull back. And just yesterday I was sending to my triathlete coach, Vinay, and I sent him like, hey, my VO2 max, which is a good indicator of how well you're performing, has gone to 48. Or my resting heart rate for the last few weeks has not been that good because I've been a little sick. He's like, just stop. Like, stop reading this. Just go with your gut and just go with what you feel. So I'm now in the phase where I'm trying to just tune out some of the data, because there's a bit of overload of data as well. Yeah. And like an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you can see all the data you want, but you're just going to shoot from the gut.
Yeah. Are you into tracking your sleep?
No.
Not much.
No, not much. I try. Most days I get good sleep, but I just know at the end of the day whether I've had a good sleep or not. And I've been told to track it, but I just don't want to get into this loop of tracking or waking up in the morning and like, oh, my watch is saying I didn't have a good sleep, but I actually slept pretty well. Right? Yeah. So I'm a judge of that myself. I don't need an instrument to tell me whether I slept well or not.
Yeah, sometimes data can be a bit more intrusive in the sense that it can Yeah, it just can sway you around what the original is. So, as an extension to your nutrition, what does your supplement stack look like?
Yeah, so I use a lot of gels, obviously. So these are energy gels, carbohydrate gels that are packed with sugar and caffeine that you use middle of a workout. I use protein shakes, typically post a workout, the whey protein that you use. I use salt chewables because I see that on long workouts I typically end up losing a lot of sodium in the body and salt, and so that makes the workout harder as well. And I think my favorite brand in this is this company called SIS that
Yeah.
makes just an amazing set of gels, powders, hydration powders. You have these Stroop waffles. I you can see the little child coming out of me when I have all this, amazing little things to pick out of when I go shopping, and so that's in some way become my new kind of food habit that I like to just go and pick out. And there's one whole section in the fridge that is dedicated to just a lot of my gels and stuff like that.
So between the three activities of your endurance sport, what's your strength and what do you think is the weakness?
My strength is definitely cycling. I love to cycle, and that's also I think I'm relatively decent at it. My weakness is definitely swimming. I've been an okay swimmer all my life. Just started to get relatively decent in it, but I'm still someone that's relatively slow when it comes to swimming and seeing a lot of the other triathletes kind of swim. So that's kind of my weakness.
So, typically, what's the mental model when you try to learn a new skill? And I ask this selfishly for myself too, because I was telling you,
Yeah.
I've been very bad in learning swimming. I mean, I hope I don't get drowned, but I'm not a swimmer, right? So, what's typically a mental model when it comes to picking new skills? Because both at work and in your pursuit of endurance, this I feel is something which you'll have to cross path almost on a regular basis, like picking new skills to get those nuanced benefits. At work, you want to pick new skills because that will help you get that edge to your competition. At your training, you want to pick this new thing so that you can get those few minutes of your training. So, what's usually your mental model?
So for me, the first step to that is getting a coach, right? If it's a big activity. Now, that's worked for me well, whether it's in endurance. So I got a swimming coach and I spent few months with that person actually learning the right technique. Likewise, in business, I got like a business coach, a CEO coach who's really helped harness some skills, softer skills, communication skills, etc. Right? So I never, or at least in the recently, I never shy away from asking for help and getting a coach. A lot of people think it's a sign of weakness, but for me, it's actually just my method of actually doing these things. The second thing is, if it's a skill that I really, really want and I need, so if I can't do an Ironman without knowing how to swim, I will get to a point where, okay, I don't need to be the best at this, but I just need to get to a point where I can swim the 3.5 or 3.8 kilometers that I need to do. And I'm okay with that, right? Whereas if it's a skill that I already have, like cycling, I am obsessed with trying to finish the cycle at a 30 to 35 kilometers hour speed. But I know it's a new skill, so I'm like, okay, I will compromise here. I will just check the box, make sure I know how to do it. But because I'm compromising here, I'm going to double down on something else, and I'm going to make sure my cycling is that much faster.
Uh, so there's this thing about I don't know whether it's myth or what, but work-life balance, right? And that stems beyond that term because you're just not trying to balance two different worlds, but you're also trying to balance multiple expectations, right? So at work, you would have expectation from your team, from your investors, from your co-founder. At home, you have expectations from your spouse, from your kids, from your parents, and most importantly, your expectation from yourself, right? I mean, that's in the corner, right? Tell me instances where you failed and you realized that it just was not working well because you were trying to kind of do those balancing act.
When I was about a year and a half ago, I thought I could do, 2 races a year, right? I had done the Ironman Dubai in March, and I thought I'll do the Ironman Goa, which was in October or November. And then I was like, okay, there was also a bunch of travel. I had just turned 40, and so I said, okay, let's travel a little bit with the kids, with friends, etc. And I thought I could do it all. And that's when I realized that no, the body just actually gave up. I let myself down only simply because I thought I took on too much. And that was a big learning for me. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be in a position where I can do 2 races a year. Because as I started training for the second race, I completely lost track of spending time with the kids. My body was in the worst shape it's been in the last kind of 2 to 3 years. And I just didn't do the race. I said, it's okay, it's a failure. I have taken on too much on my plate. Let's take this as a learning and move on in life. And right or wrong, I don't know, I compensated by now doing a full Ironman rather than doing in a half. So, you get these, for lack of a better word, these kidas in your head that, okay, I didn't do 2 races in a year.
Yeah.
So guess what? I'm going to compensate and by doing a full one. So let's see if I made a good decision or not.
Yeah, the line between crossing that kida to the next level is also called junoon, right? I mean, so let's on the positive side, because you are aiming in 5 weeks to go to, let's call it, could be a junoon to do that, right?
Yeah.
So at work now,
Yeah.
I mean, your co-founder also has this unique other side. You were saying, I'm sure by now pretty much the entire 800, 900 size of the team knows, their boss, who is he, right?
Yeah.
I mean, beyond
Yeah.
just being a co-founder, right? How much of do you have seen that fabric bring impact in that team to have their health and fitness as a priority?
I think the first impact is that they had on me, right? And the reason I say this is because up till a few years ago, I don't think I was being most open with the closest team that we have, our senior team, right? I had never really discussed this, the level of depression that we went through, the grief that I went through when the company had its troubles, right? But over the last year or two, I think I have considered this core team at work as friends, as family, to whatever greater extent that I can. And I've started to open up to them in small ways, right? And I think that has helped me, I guess, more than it's probably helped them. But now at least I'm starting to see that people are having conversations around, people understand what an Ironman is, people understand, how difficult it is. And I think people are starting to kind of say, okay, why don't I give it a shot? Maybe do my own 5K, maybe do a little bit more. Some of them think I'm a bit crazy, that I'm trying to take this challenge on. But if I'm able to even motivate 1 or 2 or 3 people in my company, I think that itself turns out to be a bigger motivation for me than for anything else.
Do you think being vulnerable is a sign of progress?
100%. And if you had asked me this 5 years ago, I'd probably say no. But I think it definitely is. As long as you're able to kind of channel it in the right way and demonstrate, okay, yes, I was vulnerable. I picked myself out of it and now it's helping me. So let's figure out how do you kind of create the same path or helping path for somebody else who's going through a similar struggle. It's definitely made me more empathetic.
So Capital Float, which you started as a company, is now called Axios, right? Why Axios?
Axio. So Axio means worthy in Greek.
Wow, okay.
And so we are obsessed with trying to make almost everyone in this country credit worthy, right? We genuinely believe that credit is a tool for good if used rightly. And obviously as a country, we are credit starved. And there is a massive penetration problem of credit. So we want to tell everybody that, hey, you are worthy, use credit the right way, and it could really be a force multiplier for you in life.
So I saw one of the tweets you did some time back where you had put up that there's this stationary bike which is part of your training system, and I think the company was offering some discounts, or there was some EMI free offer out there, right? So if today you had to pick one of the pieces from your training pain cave, what would that be?
As in pick something that I really like?
Something you really like, and the company is putting out there's an offer, a part of your training system.
So I'm actually trying to now work. There are, Bangalore has 4-5 different cycle shops, right? So I know how expensive cycling is as a sport. It is, running and swimming are not expensive at all. It's just a pair of shoes or a swimming cap that you need. Cycling is a very, very expensive sport. Every small thing that you need on a cycle costs a whole lot of money. So I'm actually trying to work with a lot of these cycling stores to, like you said, enable credit. So every small item on these stores can be bought on credit using Axio and interest free for the customers, right? Because we work with merchants to kind of make sure they make this interest free for the customers. We've just gone live with Decathlon with the same logic, right? So I'm looking in many ways to find a lot of these sporting goods companies where I can make any small sporting equipment easily affordable for as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's a great upside to have a fitness enthusiast entrepreneur, because that will miss a lot of. I mean, I don't say that's the reason. I mean, that's a stopping reason why Indians are not active or healthy. But this could be all the more a good reason.
It's a good, especially when the sport is expensive, right? Like
Yeah.
I said, cycling is expensive,
Yeah.
and anything that I can play or live in a small part
Yeah.
to get people on a cycle and just go out and cycle. I would love to see whatever I can do about that.
No, great. Thank you for doing that. That means a lot to the sporting community as well. So you're a startup guy, been there for over 9 years
Eight to
now.
9 years.
So in the startup community, who do you think is possibly the fittest?
I mean, this is a trick question because
It is.
I would definitely say it's going to be Nitin, right?
Okay.
I had the pleasure of working out with him a week ago or so, and he is fit, right? I've not really worked out with that many more people, but it's good to see guys like him actually take a lead when it comes to this.
So if you had to call out, and I know that you're very familiar with competition, because we were saying, you're almost the last few men standing
Yeah.
in terms of the competition in the professional world.
Yeah.
But if you were to call out a competition for either running, swimming, or cycling,
Yeah.
what activity would you pick up, and whom would you call out for a competition?
You know, you just burst that bubble when you told me half an hour ago that you actually run sub 3 hours. And I'm like, wait, if he's running sub 3 hours, I'm finishing a marathon in 4.5 hours, right? I'm like, okay, that's where the competitive juice really starts to kind of get in me. But you know, if I were to seriously look at, I think my friend and my coach Vinay, who's also does triathlons, right? He's an Ironman himself. I think I like to peg myself to him. And okay, he's always been faster than me, obviously. But I want to cover that distance and try to get as fast and as close to him as possible.
So Vinay is also your coach.
Yeah.
Tell me, what are the things what you take in your filter when you're trying to aim out for a coach, because you seeked out coaching help professionally at work and now also at personal. So what are the common fabrics you think a coach should have, which has kind of worked for you?
You know, one is obviously they need to have done this themselves. That's the most important thing, right? So when I reached out to Vinay or to Soumya who does strength, obviously they are kind of experts to some extent. I feel Vinay has done 3-4 triathlons. Soumya has trained a lot of triathletes. In fact, one of his batch is just a triathlete kind of focused batch. Similarly, when it comes to work, who is one of our investors is actually our coach as well. And he has built, operated, seen down cycles in his own business for like over a decade. And that really meant a lot to me, because I know, okay, if this person could do it, they picked themselves out, they got their business out of the ashes and did something successful. That is very important. That has this person actually done it themselves? I would never work with a coach, and maybe other people can, but I would never work with a coach if they have not kind of been through the fire themselves, whether that's an Ironman or whether that's business.
So there are a lot of parallels between Ironman, which is helping you out in your work.
Yeah.
Tell me a few instances where you think it is kind of more of a bane than a boon, because that obsessive, dialed in Ironman is just not helping you out in your work.
Yeah, two areas. One is when you keep waking up at 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. and then there's this lunchtime meeting where you just really want to get in a 20-minute nap. It gets really painful. So I'm like, oh God, it's going to be a long day in the office. Do I really want to get up at 4:30 in the morning and do like a 3-hour run? The second is when I travel on work, right? So I've been traveling a lot over the last 3-4 months, and the jet lag kind of gets to you, and I kind of had to make compromises to my workout when I travel. Even though I think I've been relatively disciplined, I think the work then kind of gets you. Like, something has to give. You cannot kind of do both. So at that point, work takes priority, and I'm like, okay, instead of doing my 12 hours this week, I know I'm traveling, I'll just cut it down to 6 hours.
What is the one thing you've been longing to work on yourself, and if you kind of fix that, it can give you that 10x more improvement as a person?
It's a good question. I think it's really getting rid of FOMO. I still have a lot of FOMO, right? Whether that's at work, when I try doing new things, I would rather just go a little more deep at work and just be happy with what I have. or whether that's even in my personal life, right? I struggle from FOMO many times. Keep wanting to doing something that someone else is doing, hanging out with a group of friends that I'm typically not hanging out with, and I think that's a weakness for sure. And I think that's something that I'd really like to work on.
Then what's your superpower?
My superpower is I think now it's become discipline, right? I can be at a great gathering or a party with friends, and I can be very disciplined to say I'm not going to have a drink. I'm going to go home. I'm going to sleep at 10 o'clock, and I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. I'm not that disciplined about food, like I said, but when it comes to these kind of sacrifices, I think that's starting to become my superpower.
So when your parents are saying that what on God earth this boy is doing, I mean, 3 kids, work demanding, and getting up early in the morning, going for runs and rides. What's that one thing you are now telling them so that they are turning up to be a cheerleaders for you?
I joke with my parents, but this is actually to some extent the truth. The reason why I want to be successful at work and is because my dad actually built a great business over 30 years and he sold it, had a great exit. So in many ways, the pressure doesn't come from him, but the pressure comes from myself that I want to emulate his success. I want to fill in his footsteps. And I've not yet been able to do it. And the Ironman journey is helping me to make sure I can kind of cross that path in my professional life. And so I keep joking with him. Like he tells me, what are you going to, you're going to cycle 200 kilometers? Like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, you should have told me this 30 years ago when you were building your business and you were doing things that people thought were not sustainable.
Yeah.
He used to travel to the US for like 24 hours and come back, right? And so I said, this is my why. This is why I am doing it. And I think they get it when they see the impact it's starting to have on my kids.
Yeah. So when you're sought after amongst people who want to start entrepreneurship.
I hope so.
Yeah, it is too. I mean, because you've seen those cycles,
Yeah.
right? And both persistence and the grit and determination, which is now kind of personifying in the work aspect also, and in your endurance also, right? So what's the one or two things or three things you would like to share if someone wants to get back on their health and wellness grid?
Yeah.
What is the few things you would tell them to do which they can get started right tomorrow and not procrastinate a lot?
I think the first thing is have a goal, right? And that goal cannot be weight loss. I fundamentally believe weight loss is a useless goal, right? Have a goal, whether that's an endurance event, whether that's a small sporting event, whether that is, I'll just do a 5 kilometer run, whatever it is, but have a goal why you kind of want to lose that weight, why you want to get healthier, right? The second thing I would say is, like I said earlier, get a coach, get somebody to help you. Don't try to go to the gym, be a hero, try to lift weights on your own. You're going to injure yourself, right? Third is just kind of do things in small steps. Um, I can't overemphasize that point because you will then burn out so fast. And I've seen this with some close friends who just kind of just burnt out in like 3 months, 6 months, and now struggling to actually get back into it.
And why should someone do these things? I mean, someone to give their mental and physical health as priority.
Yeah.
Why do you think they should start doing that?
I think you just lead a more fulfilled, well-balanced life, right? I today cannot imagine that I was leading the life that I was leading 5 years ago, right? I was like, what is wrong with me? And people have their own journeys and people may or may not realize this maybe their entire life. But if even one or two people can see that what impact this has had on me emotionally, mentally, physically, I would love for them to kind of see that journey and have their own journey. Like you said, it can be tennis, badminton, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a long endurance event. But find that why, find that something that helps you kind of figure out how you can stay mentally, physically fit, because I've seen the impact it has on me and on different aspects of my life. And I think everyone should be able to witness that.
Yeah. So because you're so entrenched in the startup space, and it's again common thing where people call out for requests. So if I have to ask you one or two things which you feel there's a great need of someone to innovate, specifically in the health and fitness space, and Sheena, your wife, is also an entrepreneur in the fitness space. What could be those one or two things you feel India still needs someone to go and build a solve for that problem?
I think a lot of people in India have tried this in the health and wellness space, is building electronic health records. I would love to have all my health records in one place. Many people have tried globally and in India. For some reason, it's never really taken off. But if you can tell me there's a Dropbox somewhere sitting with every health record of mine since the age of 5, I would love that. I would love to invest in that. It's a very, very difficult business to build, but I'd love to see that actually come alive someday.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great,
Yeah.
that's one common thing which at Grey Matter we also get a lot of people trying to say,
Yeah.
and it's just so hard because there's so many different stakeholders,
Yeah.
right? It's just not about you yourself.
Of course.
Because of the ecosystem what we built, most of the time your own records are not with you,
Yeah.
and the caregiver is not willing to even share it to you,
Yeah.
right? So you have to have.
No, I
this
know it's
touch
a
points.
very difficult problem
Yeah.
to solve,
Yeah.
but I just hope somebody cracks it someday.
No, sure. So next race is Ironman Copenhagen.
Yes, in 5 weeks.
Do you want to put out the goal? What the goal is? So that when we revisit, you know you are closer to it.
I'd like to finish it in sub 14 hours.
Excellent. And what after that?
I've actually not thought about it. Right now, I'm laser focused on this. But I know, knowing myself, I know the race is on 20th August, and on 21st August, I'll be thinking of what the next thing is, right? I just mentally, I don't like to give it a break, even though physically I will take a break. But on 21st August, I'll figure something out. But for now, it's just like, I can't think beyond the full Ironman in Copenhagen.
What is the one thing you learned about yourself after being a parent?
The power of influence that you have, right? I have seen my children do exactly the things that I do, right? Whether good, bad, etc. It is amazing to see the level of influence that you can have on another human being. And you've never really had it with friends or with family or parents or siblings. But as children, like I said, they are a product of what they see and the environment that they grow up in. And how you behave with them, in front of them, is a game changer to how they are going to grow up and be in life.
Yeah. So, if you ever had an opportunity to write, let's say, a few lines behind your jersey as you run or ride, do you have something what in your wish list?
There's this famous saying by Phil Knight. So he donated the business school that we actually went to, my co-founder and I, at Stanford. It says, at every step there's a new journey opens. I can't tell you how easy or difficult the journey will be, but if you take the path that is harder, it's always going to be more fun. So obviously there's a long sentence, but the point is that the easy path never really works out. The shortcuts never really work out. It's the harder path that will ultimately kind of lead to success.
If you had to go out on a run with someone from history, professionally, personally, anyone, who would that be, and where would you want to go for a run?
Definitely Michael Jordan around the Chicago Bulls arena in kind of Chicago, right? I idolize that man. I think he is probably, to me, the best sportsman in the history of sports, across all sports. And I would give anything to meet him one day.
Great. Gaurav, this has been fun. Like I said in the beginning, when I was told about you, and then again a common acquaintance connected us, I was very curious to know this other side. And when I started reading more about you, I think the only thing I knew is Stanford grad, a lending business, downtime, then raised money, and now closer to the path of profitability.
Yes.
But all the other two people who are common between us said that no, this guy also wakes up in the morning, does these long rides and long runs. And I was very curious to know why is he doing that, and is he really doing that? So after seeing you, I could for sure say you're doing that. It's been a pleasure to sit down, have this conversation. Yeah. The idea of this conversation was essentially to set some playbooks. If you can do, if I have done something, so can others do. Yeah. Everyone has to pick up their own pursuits. Not everyone has to do a 42-kilometer marathon or a 180-kilometer rides, but you could always do something to kind of explore the other side. Yeah. So thank you for sharing those toolkits. It was a super awesome conversation I had.
Thank you for having me here, and love to kind of be in touch and maybe go for a run someday.
Indeed, yes.
I'll never be as fast as you, but I can trail you for a bit.
Like I said, I have more things to pick from you than you to me, and All the best
Thank you.
for the upcoming Ironman.
Thank you so
And I
much.
hope to sit down again with you after maybe 2 or 3 Ironmans and possibly chronicle those experiences and those hard times of training.
Sure, would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Thanks.
It was a pleasure.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, that was an end of a great conversation with Gaurav. I had a lot of fun. I hope it gave you a lot of inputs to go out and explore your other side. I will see you in another episode with a new guest exploring their other side. Once more, a request from my side, please subscribe to this channel, and if you have any feedback for me, leave a comment on YouTube. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and it will mean a lot to me if you can also share this with your friends or your family. Thank you. See you next time.